Good evening and welcome. This is the January 29th, 2025 public hearing of the Land Use Commission. The City Code directs this body to hear applications for map and text amendments, special uses, including planned developments, zoning relief, and appeals from decisions of the zoning administrator, as well as to make recommendations regarding the city's long-term planning goals and objectives. Depending on the type of matter, this commission will either make a final determination or send its recommendation to City Council. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Aravallo?
Here.
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Linwall?
Here.
Commissioner Mabadi?
Here.
Commissioner Mangum?
Here.
Commissioner Medinchev?
Here.
Commissioner Puctel?
Here.
Chair Rogers.
Here. With 8 members present, we do have a quorum. Also present from city staff tonight are Neighborhood and Land Use Planner Megan Jones, Community Development Director Sarah Flax, and Policy Manager Allison Leipsinger. Thank you. I also have seen Senior Housing Planner Uri Pachter in the room, so he may be coming in for later conversations. This is a formal hearing. There are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time so that all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the commission regarding any matter on tonight's agenda will have the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. The chair will determine the time allotted to each speaker based on the number of speakers signed up. Any resident may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses, or seek a continuance of the hearing. When testifying, please state your name and address for the record and sign in on the provided public comment sheet. All testimony is taken under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony to the proposal as it relates to the standards contained in the zoning ordinance and the corresponding staff memo. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you are at a microphone when asking questions or making statements so that you may be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Our hearings for the proposed comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinance vary slightly from our regular meeting structure. We will be holding public hearings for the purpose of receiving testimony from the residents and business owners on these important documents. At our meeting tonight, staff is returning with any questions or clarifications on the comp plan so that they can complete the final draft with the assistance of the consultant team. And at this point, I'm going to ask staff, I don't know who's going to speak to timeline, but we need to, Ms. Leipsinger, we need to discuss the timing for moving forward with the process.
Good evening, Commissioners. Allison Leipziger, Policy and Intergovernmental Affairs Manager. So the timeline that staff is proposing is based on City Council's recent discussion around what they would like to see. So you have 2 meetings scheduled for February 12th and February 26th. Our proposal and hope is that we can bring you a final version on the 26th. You can indicate what you believe is missing, what you'd like council to consider when taking it up, but that would be the final vote. You would be able to get it on the 21st.
So let me can we comment on this?
So go ahead if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I'm sure we all have similar thoughts on this because we've all been anticipating what you're going to say. And what you're not considering is, number one, this is not final. This is another draft.
Correct. Final for this body.
Well, but I thought what we were going to do is we're going to have the ability to look at a final draft or see a final draft before we send it to the council for their approval. That's what they want us to do, I believe. And this schedule just doesn't allow it. And the other thing that it doesn't allow is for public comment. You've seen how much participation there's been from residents. I don't see anywhere in the schedule for resident comment.
You mean?
You give us this second draft on the 26th of February.
Right.
And you're expecting us to have comments that we're going to receive we're going to receive this a few days before this.
Right.
So that's not enough time even for us to review it. And then it's certainly not enough time for the public to review it. And yet you expect us to make comments and, take action on the 26th and that's it. That just doesn't work. It's not, and I don't even think that any of us would be willing to make any comments on it.
Okay.
So it just doesn't work. It's just, we need another schedule that incorporates our comments, gives us enough time to review, comment, give it back to you, have public comment, which I'm sure is going to be extensive, and then have it come back to us before it goes to council.
So you want two more
That's-
drafts?
do we have to decide how many drafts we need right now?
I mean, it's not going to be final until council says it's
But
final.
I'm saying something that we feel comfortable sending it to council. I don't know how many drafts that's going to take.
We're going by what council said they want their timeline to be.
right.
And I mean, we can, if you want to do a special meeting on the 19th, it'll just not be as good of a product as if you saw it on the 26th.
What I heard the council say, and we all listened, what I heard the council say was that we want it done right.
Right.
And that's what I'm asking for.
Okay.
Excuse me, I've been told that if it's not right, then it needs to go back and become right. Like, I've been told that we have more time if it's not right.
That's right. And so, I mean, yes, I've been told that too. And also I've been told that at that last meeting that it's yes or no. Like you can just vote no, but I don't believe that council gave the instruction to have us keep coming back.
Well, I don't think the council gave us a direction for you to keep coming back, but I do think there was an expectation that we would have a manageable timeline. And when I was talking to staff in the interim between that city council meeting and tonight, the discussion was that we were going to be seeing hopefully a final draft on the 19th. And then a discussion on the 19th and the 26th. And I was
We
even
can do that.
uncomfortable with that timeline because we don't have time for the public to weigh in.
Sure.
The public's still commenting on a document that is now 3 months old.
Right.
And we've had lots of discussion and we've not seen our input into that document.
Right.
And the public has not seen their input into
Right.
that document. And I just feel that timeline of literally dropping a generational document onto this body 4 days, 5 days before we're expected to cast a vote on it is not fair to anybody involved.
We can do the 19th if you'd like. We just won't have a chance to do the updates in between the 19th and the 26th. It just takes longer with design and, it's not like a Word document.
Oh, I mean, I'm familiar with that. I mean, this is what I do for a living is graphic design. I know the program they're laying out and everything like that. But the thing of it is, when we met with city council or when we presented to city council on the 13th, there were certain expectations that we had, that council had, that staff had, that everybody had. And I feel that once again, the Land Use Commission is being asked to make up for lost time. And I know that there was this whole discussion on staff about hiring a consultant in order to help with the work, which is what was discussed at council on Monday night. But I guess one of my questions is, what has been happening in the 2 weeks between city council on the 13th and tonight for us to be able to get any motion? As staff been
Writing.
what has staff been doing, I guess, is my question during that time. Because I don't think it's fair, again, to give staff the time, which by all means, staff should have the time to do it properly. I'm not saying that. But then everybody else in the cycle also has to be given the time to do it. And so when we got 8 weeks roughly for the time, I don't think the expectation was that all 8 weeks went to council, or I'm sorry, all 8 weeks went to staff, and we got 1 day at the very end, and then it goes to council. So I feel very uncomfortable with this timeline. I will defer to my fellow members because I will not be here for the execution of this timeline, but I don't think this is in the spirit of what our agreement with council was. In order to get the material we need and make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's and that sort of stuff. And I would much rather see a draft that is in a Word document
Okay.
without the pretty pictures necessarily, because the text is what we're concerned about.
That's great. That changes a lot for us.
I don't care if
We
there's
cut about
pictures.
2 weeks off for just design. So if you're talking about just the words, that's we can
And I think, I mean, I'll ask everybody. if
Although
that's-
I'm not sure pictures, sure, pictures.
But graphic charts and graphics
But
maps we
any
need.
graphs that are important to understand the.
I can't guarantee those.
Yeah, but that's also important though.
Right.
I mean, well, I don't know.
I'm sorry. Does this end, Commissioner Miranchev?
I have a kind of a practical question. What is expected to be our, let's say, decision at this draft? Shall we produce a document that lists all our recommendations? If yes, this will need time after we see the draft because we need to compile everything, be sure that everything is correctly said and that everything is by all our members. It needs time.
I think that's a great idea. In fact, I was thinking of something similar because it would help us and probably help you if we saw, let's call it a to-do list that listed all the things that we have asked for, the important things that the public has asked for, that you intend to put into this document before you go ahead and start writing it, because then we could at least help you and say, well, wait a second, you've missed this, and this before we even see it back in paragraph form. But just maybe that, I'm just thinking that would be an
That will take
idea
a
to
lot
help.
of time for us. That will take time away from writing
Okay,
in order
all
to.
right. So then it was just a thought. It was just a thought.
I think what we need to do is work backwards somewhat here from what we need. I think the expectation would be that we would have 3 meetings in order to review, take public testimony, with a draft that is 95% done. And I know that's not ideal for you and for staff.
It's not ideal for any of us because we're going to spend all of the time talking about the things that we were going to do anyway and getting
What do you
raked
mean
off
by-
the coals, raked over the coals for things that were in the last 5%. I mean, we can do that, but
I think this commission has been pretty fair to staff in terms of what our expectations have been. And I have heard staff say to city council, this is not a problem. We can do this at 2 different council meetings. And so for us now to hear that, well, staff can do it, but it's not going to come to this body until the last day before a vote or the last few days before a vote is expected, removes any comments that can be taken from the public, any public testimony on that new document. And it really is unfair to us in order for the commissioners to be able to look at that document, say, here's the things that we think are still missing or still needing to be addressed, and to make recommendations so that when it does move to council, at least it has our recommendations as part of it. I mean, that's where I am on it, but I will, like I said, I mean, I'm not going to have to live under this timeline. Commissioner Mangum?
Thank you. I would say that I do agree with my colleagues here. The timeline you just proposed is not sufficient enough for us to go over everything. Also, I would say we do need the graphics because we've asked for data and comparison charts. So it's just the text is important. The text is important, but I think we also need to see the data that we requested in this new draft that you're working on. And we're not trying to rake anybody over the coals. We just need to have a full document so that we can make an informed decision and pass it on to the council.
I have a question. What what is the real world consequence if this were to get pushed out another 3 more meetings into March? I mean, what really
You'd
happens?
have to ask council, I'm not sure.
Is council around?
But I
You
heard
mean
council,
like
I
city
heard,
council, or you mean council?
Yeah, city council.
Oh, I mean,
council.
Look, staff's just trying to go by the timelines that have,
okay, let me ask you a
been set
different
for
question.
us.
If there was no city council, how much time do you think you would need to get it right?
I think we could get it right by the 26th.
Okay, so if you could get it right by the 26th, how much time do you think we should have to get it right to respond? What do you think is a reasonable amount of time to do that?
I was told that no matter when we give it to you, we're giving you 5 days to look at it ahead of time. So when we said, well, if we can do it by the 19th, then we would give it to them by the 14th. If we can do it by the 26th, we'll do the 21st. So I was under the impression that was the working timeline.
Who gave you that timeline?
That's just what I was told.
By who?
That is, I'll just say, that is our traditional timeline for a traditional packet coming, and let me finish that before you jump there, George. That is our traditional timeline for a traditional packet. And I don't have a problem with it coming 5 days beforehand, as long as that's not the last meeting in which we have to vote. Getting it to us on the 14th for a 19th meeting, but then still having the 26th gives us a little extra time before we're asked to cast a final vote. But giving it to us on the 21st, is that the date, for the 26th, really doesn't give anything except those 5 days.
I think the other thing, the way to look at this is a document that's going to affect everyone in the city to different degrees. And so the public input on this is very important. People have jobs. People have lives. They're not working on this full time. It's amazing to me how much participation that we've had, and all the people that come here, many of them have spent lots of time looking at this document and others, and making careful comments and suggestions. I think they're going to have the same kind of comments in the second go around. We need time for that. And you can't just say, well, public, you get 5 days.
Well, they get a whole city council process too.
But as we've seen, and I'm not going to be hypercritical, it's their rules, they get to make their own rules. But when they have people show up and everybody's given 1 minute or 30 seconds as was
not
originally
enough.
proposed, that's not enough time to discuss. I mean, I feel bad giving people 3 minutes
Right.
for some of these topics.
Would it be helpful if we, in between, after the land use commission on the 26th and before it goes to council, having either like a working group or a public hearing where it's just 4 or 5 minutes limit and we just take notes on it?
I think that is something that should have happened a while ago. Because that will be after this body has weighed in and given a recommendation. And I don't know that is fair to this body.
The other thing is that
in order to give a recommendation and then continue to receive additional input and changes into the document.
if we say something is missing, for example, we still need to get that's not enough to send it out. I don't think we want to get the language back to review to see that you understood what we.
That can go on for a long time. I believe that was the point of council making a determination about when it would leave the land use commission, is that we would just be over and over and over and over again.
So I was at the same council meeting, and
Yeah.
what I heard, and I even heard the mayor say this,
Yeah.
that we need to get it right. The deadline is something to focus on, but it's not the ultimate. And if it needs to take more time, it needs to take more time. So I'm not sure why you're arguing against this if that's exactly what the mayor said.
So I just kind of want to get us off of this for a moment, because I mean, we're arguing, but there's a third party that's not here in council, and we all heard things, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm hearing from staff is that the 21st is when they can get the Land Use Commission the documents that are necessary, are a second draft, whether it be final with every last thing done, or if it's 95% there or whatever it is. But that's the date that you can, as staff, can deliver something to the Land Use Commission.
That's correct. If you want to consider a Word document as opposed to a graphically designed pretty
Well,
thing.
yeah, I mean, I still think we need some of the graphics. I mean, maps are going to play an important role.
I would suggest we need the document maybe without the photos. I don't think we need photos.
It's not the photos that are going to take a long time. It's
Yeah.
then yes, the 21st.
Okay. So I guess at this point, what I would ask the commissioners is, what is the number of meetings that are appropriate for us to hold on a draft document that will be fairly finalized, will include maps, charts, all the language that, of course, there may be things that get missed and we'd have to add in, or there may be tweaks made to it during that discussion. But how many meetings does this commission feel it requires in order to make an informed decision?
To include public comment.
To include public comment.
I'd say probably more than that.
I would,
Vote on 12?
I would say
26th and the 5th. No, we don't meet on the 5th. We meet on the 12th.
Well, I mean, this would be extra meetings.
Yeah, but
Well, also to be clear, when we vote on something, it's not a absolute yes or no. We could vote on something and include, amendment that we all agree on,
Right.
right?
Yep.
right. with
So,
yeah.
so it's not like we need to be seeing the final thing.
Well, I think we should. And I think, yeah, go ahead.
No, but after the 21st, we will have this new draft.
Right.
I'm saying we don't need a new process of having that actually physically revised before we vote on it.
Oh, I think we do. Because there, like I said before, there may be things, ideas missing, and we want to see them come back in written form.
We can have that in written form without it being compiled in the document
I don't.
as a separate document.
Like
like
an
text
appendix or something.
Yeah.
The draft that you're proposing on the 21st, is it going to include the preliminary findings appendix, and will it include the?
I believe so. I believe so. I wouldn't bet my life savings on it, but I believe so. Yeah. I think so.
Let me go to this end of the dais because I'm hearing a lot from down here. Commissioner Mangum?
Do we know how many pages this draft will be?
At least 200
Okay.
with the appendix
so
and stuff. Appendices.
I think we need to see the 200 pages before we determine how many more meetings we need.
I would agree.
I was going to say, why do we have to decide how many meetings right now? Because I think you're absolutely right. We'll know when we see the next version.
I think there needs to be a timeline, even if it's a draft timeline put together. I don't think it's fair to the public to just say, come back and check in with us on February 26th, and we'll decide then how many meetings we need to have.
I would think the public would be in favor of that because they want it right. They want their input, and we don't know how long that will take. I don't think the public would be upset by that.
Any other thoughts from this end over here?
So I was saying that we need one meeting to see the draft for the first time. Then we will need the public comments. Then we need to compile everything. And maybe then staff will need some time to make it official. And then we vote. So it's something like 3 or 4 of these meetings. That's what
I mean, I think we just need to, because I want staff to be able to address this with city council and for anyone else to be able to address it with city council, that we feel we need a minimum of a certain number of meetings to feel comfortable with this document. That's not saying that that's the only meetings, but a minimum number of one is not enough. And so based on just best guesses, what is that number?
I think at this point, we need further clarification, further opinions later, but 4. That's what.
Go ahead, Brian.
Commissioner Johnson.
If your question is what's the absolute minimum number of meetings, for me that would be 3. That would be absolute minimum. But I would feel more comfortable with 4 because, I was at the city council meeting on the 13th as well, or whenever it was, and the conversation about we want it done right and we want to move. I don't want to be in a position where we go through all this work and because we don't have enough meetings, enough public input, enough drafts, that I end up voting no on this thing. I don't want to be in that position because then we're disrespecting the work that staff has done and this whole process. And so three more meetings, that's the minimum. But at 3 more meetings, that makes me feel a little uncomfortable that it will be in a complete enough place with enough public input, with us digesting the revisions. I'm not sure if it's going to be there for me to vote yes, and I don't want to send it to City Council without a consensus from us and from the community. So I would ask for 4.
Okay.
Commissioner Aravallo.
Is there any way that we could get a pre-draft? So something on the 14th.
Yeah, if you want just the Word, like the Word document.
And then see what we can get for the 21st. And then to do it that way.
But again, that's not going to have the graphs and the
Well, let's see how far we
maps
get.
and stuff.
Let's
I'm
see how
happy
far
to.
we get on the first go around so that the second one that's supposed to be the final, see if those graphs can be incorporated by then. I don't know if that
Happy to
is
do
possible.
I want to go back to this idea of the to-do list. You said it would take more time for you to develop the to-do list. I don't see how you could even do this
We
without
have
a to-do
internal
list.
stuff. We have internal stuff, but to
Well-
make it public, it would take some
Well,
time.
and it's something that can't be shared. And but to the point, the reason I'm asking this is because it's one way of us at least going through the different topics that have to be addressed, graphs that have to be addressed, 3D diagrams that have to be done. If we had some sort of list, we could say right now, or after we've studied it, this is missing. Well, we talked about this. That should be on the list. Give you a head start. I mean, I don't know. It seems like, I don't know what form it's in. When you say that, is it on what, sticky notes or what?
It's in a few different places is the thing. We're drawing from, we're watching past land use commission meetings to make sure we got everything. We're looking at our surveys. We're going through everything. And so to compile all of that would take some time.
Okay, but don't you have to do that before you set out to write the document?
We've split it up amongst staff, and whoever's responsible for it is taking care of it.
Yeah, I think you guys are professionals. You manage your own time, figure that out, and do your own thing. In my opinion, what you're saying is on the 21st, you can give us a Word document.
Before the 21st, I can give you a Word.
And on the 26th, you can give us a
21st, I'll give
Let me
you.
ask my question. On the 26th, you said you could give us a preliminary draft with photos and graphs, or on the 21st?
The 21st.
For the 26th.
Correct. On the 21st for the 26th.
Okay, so why don't we just do this? Why don't we go along with that, see what you give us, and if it turns out that we need more time, we've pretty much killed the kitty here on this. We know that we are not happy with the amount of time we don't have, so it won't come as a shock to council if we go, hey, we need more time. I mean, I think they'll get that message pretty clear after tonight, and possibly we will need more time. So why don't we just rush as fast as we can to get the best product we can by the 21st, with the understanding that if we can't get the amendments in fast enough, or we can't, but I do share with George that really the public needs to be heard because the public's reaching us.
Right.
And each time they talk to me, I'm like, come here because this is where it matters. Telling me something is, I'm just one guy. Tell the city,
Next time, pass it on to us.
pass it on to staff.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that takes time. That you need to be able to process that. The city has to have time to talk.
Also, when you give us this document, is it going to be redlined as to what changes have been made? Okay, so this is a problem because 200 pages we're going to have to review from scratch. And then according to what you just said, if we say, well, here's some comments and some edits, and we get another 200 pages back, we won't have any idea where those changes are made. That's not even normal.
I don't think it's typical to keep handing out red lines.
Wait. We are all in business, okay?
Is it?
We understand how it works. And trust me, that's how it works.
Want a redlined document?
Yeah.
Not now.
Not now, but absolutely.
After let me weigh in.
Please.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I think most of you know me, but, I started out as city staff, so I've worked for the city of Evanston at the beginning of my career, so I understand the expectations and the challenges of being city staff. But the last 30 years of my planning career, I spent working for a consulting firm, basically doing the kinds of plans, the comprehensive plans. I think I've got like a dozen under my belt and then another dozen or so major strategic plans. So I know how long it takes to produce a document. And, I think when we all started this, we expected that we would have something more complete than we got to review in November. And there were, all of us had a number of chapters that, we felt were missing, language that just wasn't at all Evanston. And I think that's probably still, every time I look at it, it's, I find something else that just isn't right. And so I think it's really critically important that we get a second draft. So the 21st, if we can get something, that would be really good. But one thing about doing a comprehensive plan especially is that needs to be a consensus document. So the community needs to be on board, not unanimity. So if somebody, thinks that, rather than talk about parks, we should get rid of all our parks. I mean, that's not going to fly because that's not going to be a consensus opinion, but you need the time to build consensus. There's a lot of really good information that came from the boards and commissions that presented at our last meeting, provided comments. There's a ton of really important stuff that in the comments and that have been submitted in writing, and then also the testimony. And it is really important that the community's voice make its way into the comprehensive plan and that it is comprehensive. Now, I have some comments about the community systems, whatever our new chapter is, which I'll get to in a bit. But the way I see it, one of the recommendations I think came from the Preservation Commission, we need an implementation chapter. Now, you can't do an implementation chapter until there's agreement on what the policies and objectives are. And I noticed in the plan that I'm not sure that, there's a sentence where you talk about goals, policies, and actions. I'm not sure that we really have identified that each of the chapters identifies what the goal is for that chapter. And so that needs to be kind of thought about and worked into the overall scheme of things. But I think that it is, really, really important that the next draft actually be a complete draft that incorporates all of the stuff, the topics and information that have been presented to us and that we've presented to you. Because, you can't, if we have another incomplete draft, then you're not going to have community consensus. And that's just critically important to have that. And, so the implementation chapter is, needs, that's not going to be done on the 21st. You're just not going to be able to do that. And the other piece that is going to be really critical in terms of when we get back to zoning is the land use section. Now, right now, since it looks like the stuff that talked about the utility systems and some other things was moved to the community systems chapter, we really don't have a good sense of what our land use goals are. And I would think that what we really need to do, I think we need to have the draft on the 21st, but I think after that, what we're really going to need to set us up for a zoning discussion is to have some sort of a land use workshop, because we've got the community looking at the interactive zoning map, and and I can't tell you. I know that setters and corridors aren't the right, that wasn't the right construct, but neighborhoods get defined all sorts of different ways. I mean, there's Central Street, and some of the things that were in the Central Street overlay may apply to Chicago Avenue, but I think we need to have a community discussion about what our land use policy should be, and what I really, I like the process that we've gone through. I know it's been messy and the public's not real happy with it, but I think was a lot of value in trying to do the community engagement for both the comp plan and the zoning ordinance at the same time. I even don't mind that there was an effort to do the draft of the
Code.
zoning ordinance, at the same time that the plan was being put out, because it really kind of illustrates what some of the policies and actions in the plan, how they would translate into zoning policy. And I think obviously there are a lot of people who don't like some of the land use how the zoning ordinance is implementing those policies, which says that, really kind of maybe you ought to rethink that policy, because it's just, it's not acceptable to the community. And it's important that a comprehensive plan document really reflect the community values and what's important to the community. And it can't be, there were, if you look kind of back to some of the early, there in the summer, there was the council discussion of kind of some of the big ideas.
Right.
But even that was something that was done, appears to have been done as a presentation to council. And so they were asked to kind of react to those on the fly without any particular background or input. And that's just not the way a planning process typically plays out. And, we got references, based on that discussion. And there were, and actually there are pieces in that discussion that ought to find their way into the comprehensive plan. And there are some that haven't yet. So, doing a comprehensive plan is kind of a messy thing. And I've got to say, I like the layout. I like the format. I really like the fact that, you can see that where policies or actions cross multiple topic areas. So we're not dealing with silos. And frankly, I think we've got the basis for a really good document, but it can't be rushed. I mean, it just can't be. So and we're to the point where we should not be dealing with the document that we had in November, because you've got so much feedback, and you guys are, staff is city staff is a capable crew. I mean, I trust you guys to write and do, and do a good job. And if you need, little graphic design assistance, that's great. But staff, Uri's got, a handle on data, and you can kind of tell what the goals are. And like in each of the chapters, I think in the implementation, it's kind of like, and other commissioners have asked, like, what's the what's our outcome? What are we trying to achieve? Which means you have to have the baseline information. So that, trust me, it takes time to do. And I think that trying to get something to us on the 21st is a great goal, because what I heard the council say is do it right, but hurry. So, and hurry is a relative term. I mean, it really is. So I don't think that staff should try to, I think you should hurry and try to get this as complete as possible, but I don't think you should be surprised if on the 26th in the document we're going to say, this isn't quite right, but there are still missing pieces. And one of the missing pieces that I think actually would be really helpful when I was going through this, the outline for the community systems thing, is there really isn't any discussion yet. There's a section heading for talking about public buildings, but there's not any real description. And, and I think that the plan would greatly benefit from that. You've got the five fire stations. You've got a police station. You've got this putting assets to work. And frankly, I think what would be really helpful is to have that chapter outlined and some of the goals and objectives go to the city council, because I think that's something where we really need their input. I mean, we can dream up policies that we think are wonderful to have, but I think the council needs to kind of weigh in on are there you've got the Noyes Art Center, for example, that I know needs a lot of capital improvements, but if you look at kind of how that building gets used, it is part of the arts and placemaking chapter, it's part of the economic development chapter, because we've got a bunch of, that's a major part of our industry. So I just don't think staff should take it upon themselves to rush. Get us something on the 21st, that'd be great, but I don't think you should expect that that's going to be the final.
I leave that up to you and the council,
But that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that I think that this is a messy process, and we can do it right. I've got my experience pales to some experience of others in this community, I think. So, I think that we just need to rely on our residents to get it right and to give them a chance to weigh in. So I think I think we do need 4 meetings, and I think that get us something as if it's really thorough and complete and you can pull it all off and we can deal with whatever land use is going to be. And, I see that as a challenge. The other thing, I think kind of, just in looking through, I guess we need to do the schedule, but I do have comments about, the outline and, some of the other.
Commissioner Howland.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing. This has been discussed before, but one of the major drivers, it seems to me, of the comprehensive plan is the idea that Evanston's population is going to increase dramatically. I think that's certainly a debatable issue, and it's because it's such a driver of many things. Where does that stand? Is that still going to be incorporated in the comprehensive plan? Because like you were saying, it's all integrated. And if you keep, even though there's been some dispute about that, and if it's really not true, then we need to take it out. And then what does that mean for the rest of the document?
Well, and population is a function of not only the number of housing units you've got, but it's also household size, which has been going down, but it could go up, we don't know. So I think that, just playing around with the thing, if all of the vacant units we have in town are suddenly full with the current household size, we'd be at 84,000. So I'm not sure that household or the projected population is going to be a function of what families look like in the future, plus how many housing units we have. So it's it's a guess. And I don't think we should be focusing on trying to build houses for so many more people. Whoops.
Ms. Flax, do you want to?
I think one of the things we all have to understand is that is a population that's the projection by CMAP. But we don't know that that will happen. But I think what we need to do is show how we can provide a comprehensive plan that would give the ability to accommodate a growing population. Because the reality is this, if the population isn't growing and people don't want to move here, we're not going to see development because developers aren't going to build where they're not going to have things used. I mean, it's a balancing act, but we have to look at what will be the framework to allow growth.
Yeah, well, I think we
So that's
need
what
to,
we're
I
really
think the
talking
land use section needs to
I want
include
to bring us
opportunity for
back to a
growth.
discussion on timing.
Yeah.
Because we're getting kind of a far afield here. Commissioner Puctel, do you have something?
Yeah, I just have a comment about process. I think it's important that we all have maybe a vision of how this is actually going to end up in terms of the practical documents and what we're voting on and how that actually works. I maintain that you're getting the draft on the 21st is fine, but then that is the only draft we need to see. We can handle any changes, modifications, additions with separate text amendments that simply say, we're striking this, we're modifying this, we're adding this. And then ultimately out of this commission, we say we are approving this comprehensive plan with this X number of amendments, and we push it out of this group like that. It's absolutely a waste of time to have to wait for more drafts incorporating all that.
Okay, that's assuming that whatever comments we make can be succinctly in a paragraph. But it could be several statements throughout the whole document. I don't know how it's going to be. So what's the difference between the staff developing an addendum for us than just inserting it into the document?
Redesign.
What's that?
Redesign. Graphic changes.
Okay, so if we saw the revision could be in Word, if that's what we're talking about.
Sounds good to me.
Sure.
Okay. But I still say, I don't know that could be a solution, but it might not be if the changes are throughout the document. And, you know what I mean? I don't want to see a document that says, on page 4, paragraph 3, change this to this, and then have a whole list of things like that. I don't want to see that.
You have a document with a paragraph with track changes on it for that particular part, so you can see exactly what it is. A huge part of my job is codes and standards and committee work. This is perfectly normal and perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, and I would agree if we, and that was kind of how this original process was supposed to work, but we didn't have, we had a draft that was missing a lot of pieces. And so, the real question is whether, and it really goes down to, does staff have enough time to really do it together? And if it turns out that it's taking you longer than you think it's going to, I think it would be preferable for you to say, this isn't going to be ready. We need 2 more weeks. Because I think that my goal for this whole thing would be that we have a complete draft. The community and all the boards and commissions have a chance to weigh in and look at it and comment and, and say, get up in front of us and say, yeah, we agree with this. This represents our vision and for the future. Because as far as I'm concerned, you ought to be able to get, us to vote unanimously that to recommend this to the city council. Because if it's a split vote or things are really missing, what's going to happen is it's going to get to the city council. And then they're going to have, with all the other stuff that they have on their plate, they're going to have the public and the commissions, coming and saying, this just doesn't represent our vision. And I think that would be far worse. I mean, I think what the goal should be is that we can do a positive, unanimous recommendation to the city council. There can be, public hearing at the city council. everybody can get up and say, yeah, this is what our vision, in general policies moving forward are going to be. And I think we all should recognize that there are going to be competing policies and priorities in the document that, we're not trying to resolve those because, one of the real values of this document is we got climate action plan, there's transportation plan, soon to be a Parks and Rec plan, and which have a lot of the details. But the comprehensive plan is where you're going to see that, if we use the schools, if a school closes and we use the school for open space, then that means we don't have land for housing. So there are going to be those conflicts, and that's okay in a comp plan.
All right. So one last thing, when you are, a colleague here suggesting that we do an addendum and mark it up that way, is that what you're going to submit to the council? Or is it going to be tied out and presented little bow and ribbon looking nice the way that we were previously asking?
I assume council will want to see it with a bow.
Okay, so that
That's my
means that
assumption.
time that you, so then what we're saving time here is our rebuttal of the bow. We're getting in front of the bow. We're just getting in front saying, okay, let's make these changes. And then we trust that those changes manifest themselves in the end document.
It's not a matter of trust. It's pretty straightforward. If you have text with track changes, that is what it is.
If we say, so that, but that takes time though to get done, correct?
Yeah, it takes some
Okay.
design time, yeah.
Okay, so we have that time then, or we will have that time. You will demand that time if we get to that point.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on how long it is going to take for it to go from land use commission to council, right? So if let's say, miracle of miracles, lightning strikes and everybody loves what we give you on the 21st. Nothing's missing, no typos, it's perfect. Then yeah, we can go to council on March 10th. Easily, no problem. If you if you get it and you say we love this 90% and the public says we all hate this one paragraph, and then we go and we change that paragraph, and you want another meeting on the 12th of March and we show you that paragraph and it's just that, we can get it to council by March 26th. If everyone hates it and it's terrible and we have to rewrite the whole thing, it's not going to council for a long time. So it really depends on
Okay.
the feedback.
I have a question.
Yes,
Do
please.
you envision that the meeting on the 21st with, let's say, ideal draft will be a meeting with the public and we will receive the public comments on the same meeting,
26th, yes.
on the 26th?
Yeah, you get it on the 21st and you have.
So everybody will have 5 days to review, including the public.
Yeah.
Do you think this is enough? I'm kind of.
So I just kind of want to cut to the chase here because we're just going to talk nonstop about this for forever. So what I want to do is say that staff has told us they can get us things on the 21st. That's when we will get the document in the state that we feel we need to have the document prepared for us, which means there will be a hearing on the 26th. I don't see how public testimony is received on that document. We weigh in on that document, make any recommendations or anything else in time to get it to city council. So what I want to say right now, and I'm hoping that the rest of the commissioners will back me up on this, is the expectation of council having us hand something off on the 26th is not realistic under this timeline, period. And so I just want to get that out there so council can rebut that, discuss it, whatever they want to do. But with this timeline, unless this body is willing to have a 12-hour meeting, you aren't going to fit in public testimony and get recommendations from 9 different commissioners or 8 different commissioners in one
Well,
meeting.
no, and frankly, I think that it is important that the other boards and commissions that are relevant
Yeah,
weigh in.
and I get that. I don't want to say I'm not worried about them at this point, but I'm not. I'm wanting us to say to council that we will not be able to make a recommendation on the 26th. And then council can say whatever they want to say in response to that, but knowing that we don't feel that that is enough time to do this right, to get the public testimony in, and to give this body the ability to make informed decisions with recommendations for things that we feel still need to be tweaked or changed. It's just not possible. And then city council can decide whether they want to, if they still feel that this needs to happen before April 1st, or if they feel the schedule needs to be re-examined then. So that's all I want to put out right now. I don't want us to get into more about specific meetings, other than to say that with us getting a draft, that should be a very, very close to final draft. I always call it a second draft because it's not 100% final. On the 21st, that we will not be able to make a recommendation to city council on the 26th.
Right.
And I think that's where we have to leave it at this point, because there's going to be discussion based on what happens on that, what's in that document on the 21st. And I know that's not really, that's kind of kicking the can down the road and not fair to the public to say that we don't know when we're going to discuss it again. But I think we feel, and I didn't look at this then, but I think everybody feels pretty confident in the conversation that I've heard is that we will not be able to make a recommendation on the 26th.
Yeah. I think
All right.
the other question I have, because at some point we're going to have to continue this and move forward. But Sarah, do we have any idea when we're going to have real project or regular projects we have to review? Because that's good.
Is there, I don't
But are
know.
there things scheduled in March? And, because if you've got major projects, that
We don't have any final dates for anything as of this time.
So how many projects do we have in the queue waiting to be scheduled? Because that also, we may not have people scheduled on a certain date, but where are people in the process that we start running into, not just continually putting them off?
We don't have full applications on any of the major projects yet.
All right.
okay. Yeah, so
So I just wanted to clarify that when we say something isn't scheduled, that we don't have somebody that we aren't scheduling because we're unsure of this timeline. Okay.
One last thing. On the 26th, would we be able to discuss scheduling future meetings for public comment?
You'll have to.
yeah.
You'll have to.
Okay. Because that's the concern. Yeah.
And that conversation will probably have to take place in those couple days before the 26th, with the new chair, at that time to set that timeline. So, do you need anything else from us on this? All right.
Well, I've got.
All right. No. I want
On
on
the
the
schedule.
timeline. I want to move on from the
Yes.
timeline. So we are going to take hopefully about 45 minutes to an hour tops to have staff check in with us on any questions they have on the material that we've shared so far, or on the comments that staff or that commissioners may have based on the documents that have been released to us, which included the outline of the community systems, which again, it's just a very bare outline. But if there are things in there that we feel need to be tweaked, added, removed, anything like that. And Commissioner Lindwald, I'll start with you
Yes.
since I know you have several.
Yes. Really, with respect to the community systems under the community facilities, I think that needs to be really fleshed out. Obviously, we have we've mentioned kind of the fire systems, or fire department. And actually, basically one of these things came from one of the comments by members of the public, describing, do we have the service capacity to support new development? And I think that it would be really helpful to have a discussion of all of our public buildings and kind of their status. And I know that, kind of the capital improvement needs has been on the agenda, but also in terms of do we have the fire department, the paramedic capacity to handle, 1,000 new units or however many we end up anticipating. But, the police headquarters is a big issue. I think a discussion of kind of the fire station locations and kind of why they're where they are. That we went through this probably 20 or 30 years ago, and they're located to provide optimal service for the community, but I think that would be helpful. This service center, I know that there are plans underway to do the improvements that are needed for that facility, but the library needs to be discussed. So I think that, and it may turn out that rather than just talking about community systems, the public buildings or public, they may need to be a separate chapter, depending on, and just in terms of, most of our chapters are a certain length, and just in terms of flow, and more discussion, it just might make sense. And, and I think obviously making sure we have well-maintained public facilities to house our operations is kind of the overall policy, I would think. And you've got replacing the police headquarters, making a long-term decision about the civic center, continuing and basically developing the public facility capital improvement program. So there are a bunch of things on that. And I know part of it fits into the discussion of, putting assets to work, which again needs to be, explained to the public so they know what that is. And the other, and that's really kind of what I have in terms of that. And the other thing that just has occurred to me, thinking about, transportation especially, I think we need to acknowledge that, we have 39,000 jobs in town. So and most of the people are coming from outside of Evanston to get to them. So while right now, if I recall correctly, the transportation chapter really kind of focuses on how residents of Evanston get to their jobs or public transportation needs of those. I think we need to kind of broaden the discussion a little bit and talk about how it's transportation is a regional issue, just like housing is a regional issue. So I think, those are kind of that. And then the one other, kind of, I appreciate the speaker from our last couple weeks ago, or maybe last week, but who had kind of some policy suggestion or action suggestions. I'd kind of like to do one that would read as follows, and and again, I'll defer to my commissioners to see if they think it's a good idea or a bad idea. But it's recognize Evanston's single-family housing stock as a key component of Evanston's community identity. Is kind of something I'd like to see. And I think it goes in the land use section when you get one. So those are my basic comments.
Halleck.
Yeah, we received in our packet a 3-page memo from Design Evanston. And rather than go through all the points that they've made here, which is like 10, 20, 30, 25, 30 points, I would just say I would recommend, I think they're all good suggestions. And some of them have been made before, but I would recommend incorporating these ideas that are outlined in this January 29th memo from Design Evanston. Further to that, one of the, I think, objectives of Design Evanston is to improve the quality of the built environment in Evanston. And I hesitate to recommend, peer architects to review other architects in that strict sense. But I think that it's a good idea to include quality, and quality is visual and other things into the comprehensive plan somehow. But I really do like this memo that Design Evanston put together.
And they'll be doing a presentation in a little bit. Other thoughts, Commissioner Miranchev?
I want to add something to the line of thoughts. I don't know whether it is in the community systems, in the environment, in the park and open space, but one of the things I think is missing, it is the land around the lake shore, where depending on the water coming and going, we're losing land or we're adding, but it is somehow uncontrolled at the moment. We have these ugly black bags of sand that protect somehow the park along the lake shore. But this is, I would always say, it's a temporary solution. We have to have a good real solution about the lake shore of Evanston, whether it is protecting the sand, whether it needs more, it needs less, but we have to have a real solution about our lake shore.
I had another comment, and this is probably a little premature because I know that the council is reviewing this healthy buildings ordinance, but what happened at the last council is that several building owners, stood up and said, hey, look, this is a great idea, but if you incorporate all electric buildings as an example, there's other energy efficiency things that probably fall under the same response, but our rent or the amount that average person pays for utilities is going to go from I'm close on this, like $65 to $400. And that is not something we want to do. So what my comment is that throughout the comprehensive plan, when we say ensure or, definite, we will do this, I think recommend is probably a better term. And like I said, I don't know how the council's going to come down on this, but I think that's for a comprehensive plan. That's given that both sides of this issue are pretty extreme. I think recommend would be a better term.
I also think, though, that if we all agree that this is a living document, some of that becomes a little more flexible because we'll know where we are in 5 years. This isn't something that just gets done, put on the shelf for 20 years like our last comp plan, unfortunately, kind of was done. So I think that any recommendation on the comp plan to City Council should include some reference to the document should be reviewed at certain periods of time. And so some of those things that we say are more definite, that are kind of down the road a little bit, may be tweaked as that part of that process.
Yeah, and again, I think that the value of this document is that it is comprehensive and it identifies those kinds of trade-offs that people will, future councils will need to make.
Right.
So I think it's, that's again, why I like the structure and the format and the fact that policies and actions cut across. So, things related to preservation are just not in the preservation chapter. They're sprinkled throughout the document. And I, to the extent that you see other opportunities to do that when the rewrite is happening, I think I would encourage you to do it.
All right. Anything from this end of the dais? That was faster than I thought it was going to be. Anybody have anything else they want to mention to staff before staff kind of has their ideas from us on the stuff that's been presented?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I will say that Commissioner Lindwall, I agree with. I think that's a great addition. The bit that you said about the legacy of Evanston's single-family housing stock is an important component of the history of the city. You worded it more eloquently than I just recounted, but I'm in support. I think that's a great idea.
All right. With that, we will move on to our next item of business unless staff has any questions for commissioners. Ms. Jones?
No, I mean, you've provided a good amount of information for us to go through. I appreciate the comments on the community systems chapter since that's new information. I guess if there's any other feedback on the community health chapter, since that's another new chapter that you had an outline on, that would be good to have. I don't think there were too many comments on that. It was a pretty robust
I thought
outline.
that the health one was pretty good. I think somebody in the staff of papers I added you, whatever comments I had were in there, but I thought that was fairly well done.
All right.
When we had the person speak to us that was a member of the Housing Strategic Plan Committee, they were very good and they were very informed and they didn't say that they would give us a in progress strategic plan, but we did talk about them or her, she being present when we specifically talked about housing. Now, is that appropriate for this comprehensive plan to do that?
I think the strategic housing plan, creating one is one of the actions in this document.
Which is currently being done by HCDC, which is the board that woman had come from.
But that is going to be done after the comp plan is done?
Probably.
It probably is, just on the timing. So that will be something that will need to be factored into the zoning because that's going to be a lot more of the strategic items that need to be action taken on them. And the execution part of this really comes in the zoning ordinance. So I think that as the zoning ordinance kicks off and moves through, probably having a number of those boards and commissions and perhaps even some of the ones that were not invited just in the sake of time would be important to have discussions with them. All right. Ms. Flax, anything else from you?
I don't have anything specific, but questions. But one of the things I did want to point out is the comprehensive plan will have dates in it to reevaluate and see how things are going.
Okay.
But we also, the individual plans, like the housing plan, George, it is in essence an implementation method of, but we want the goals to be in the comprehensive plan. Do you see what I'm saying?
We also talked about an implementation section. So how does that?
Well, that's kind of the one thing I'm not sure, I understand you're going to get us a draft and it's going to have everything in it, but I would say that I don't think we should have a complete implementation chapter. I think maybe a page outline showing how it would be organized, maybe talking about the fact that the comprehensive plan should be reviewed every 2 years or whatever the timeline is. So I think, and maybe, again, I think that at some point it's going to be important to know what the baseline metrics are for the chapters, and then the implementation is going to have to go, what is our goal? Is our goal to have, is one of our actions to create a community dashboard that tracks progress? I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is, it's kind of one of the, it's one of the pieces that, why we can't say, yeah, we can approve a comprehensive plan before we've seen it, because we just don't know if if we or the public or the other boards and commissions thinks that whatever the document is gonna, get us to where we need to be.
And we don't see the comprehensive plan as driving all the specific strategies for the whole 20-year period, of course, which is exactly what we're talking about. It has to be flexible enough and it has to be able to guide things, but not, so a lot's going to change in those 20 years that we can't predict right now.
All right. With that, we'll move on to the next item of business, which is the election of the chair, but I'm actually going to move that towards the end after we take public comment, if that's okay with all the commissioners, rather than changing chairs in the middle of a meeting. So with that, we'll move on to communications. Is there anything that staff has to communicate? I think we've kind of already had our communications. So with that, we'll move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address us. I have two groups who had requested additional time, and I have a total of 4 individuals signed up to speak beyond that. And I think I have you. She's going to check and make sure if anybody else is signed up, but I did pick up the first sheet out there, but there may be a second sheet out there with some additional names. But regardless, I'm not going to have the 45 people that we've been having speak. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and begin with the presentations from organizations that had requested additional time. The first one being Jeff Smith, and then Dave Galloway will go second, representing Design Evanston. And I will give 10 minutes to Mr. Smith and 10 minutes to Mr. Galloway to do their presentations. I will again acknowledge that I'm using my phone to keep track of time because the timer has not been repaired. This is what we do now.
And this, the arrow moves slide to slide?
Should give it a try.
Yep. Great.
All right.
Okay.
So, Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of staff, commissioners, Chairman Rogers, thank you for your service, and my friends and neighbors. I'm going to try and condense 1,000 hours of work over many years into 10 minutes. The intersection of Central Street and the railroad was identified in the 1917 plan of Evanston as an up-and-coming hub of commerce, although it was a dirt road once you got past what's now Hardigan's. But if you look closely, you can see the streetcar tracks there. The neighborhood was largely built out in the building boom of the 1920s that followed Evanston's adoption of zoning, with a pause during the Depression, and 3 decades later, it was truly transit-oriented development. 20 years ago, another building boom in the U.S. before the bust of the Great Recession was producing both controversy and projects that a lot of folks in the neighborhood thought were changing the character of the neighborhood. And one issue was that because there wasn't certainty, there was a constant wheeling and dealing with the city council over the unlimited site development allowances. A line was finally drawn, or a battle line, over what was the great frame-up, now the Little Green Treehouse Daycare Center. This is a photoshopping of what could have been built along that corridor using actual Evanston buildings that are there. And suffice it to say that folks were not happy at that prospect because it's such a nice low-rise retail district. Another concern was the lack of buffer between large projects that are built along Central Street and those of the bordering streets, Harrison, Hartzell, and how they interface with single family or 2 flats, much lower rise development. And it's obviously life changing if it happens to you, and value changing to property. So the result was that the city council passed the first B1A district, which is a true mixed use district that aims to put residences on top of mom and pop stores, independent retail, thus preserving both the character of the business district and the low rise aesthetic feel. But right on the heels of that, we got controversy over the Eastwood project to redevelop what had been the site of once Evanston's largest movie theater complex. And looking here west from Eastwood, you can see how where the theater was on the south side of the street was essentially low rise, but under the existing zoning at that time, that's what it could have turned into, and it was not that much different than what was originally proposed. So that got residents focused on the existing zoning and what else might be transformed with that existing zoning. And a little photoshopping demonstrates that projects that had gone up elsewhere in Evanston would fundamentally change the character of Central Street under what was then B2 zoning. And the B2 straddled Green Bay on both the east and west side. So Council dealt with the level of upset and the fact that these controversies kept on popping up by saying, let's do a real plan for the whole street from one end to the other, Little Island all the way down to the lighthouse. And it was actually a pretty good process. Lakota Consulting Group came in, and I wish I had another 5 minutes to talk about how that process compared to what we've seen so far. There was a lot of give and take. Draft plans came out, comments, workshops, visioning, breakout sessions were held, and then each time there would be both posted on the website and presented. Here's what you said. Here's how we responded. Here's the changes we've made. And I believe there was three drafts at least. And it worked at kind of a fast pace. Obviously, it didn't have the degree of comprehension that a comprehensive plan has. It was almost only over land use, but it ultimately resulted in these were the basic resident recommendations, which were largely about bulk, mass, but also not having street deadening office uses or phony retail, as we called it, where you essentially had a shallow store that was non-functional but fronting for essentially a surface parking garage that was hidden. And the result, we spent an entire evening, Central Street Neighbors did, before the Plan Commission, showing 35 examples of step backs and how they are a functional and workable solution in Evanston that can create a human scale pedestrian experience at street level, yet still be financially viable. There was a lot of illustrations, again, a contrast with what we've seen so far, charrettes, renderings, enabling people to really drill down to the building and street level. Obviously, some things never come to pass, but it still provides a discussion point. And here, for example, the streetscape plans for the parking lot area, although the parking garage was not developed, came in useful when the Ryan Field lighting situation came up. The maps and charts that were provided honed in and said, here's what it's going to do. Here, as you can reference in the plan, that it was recommended, and this is what it's actually going to do to the zoning. So it was a very workable process. It was very intense at the time. It resulted in a Central Street master plan that was heartily recommended by the Plan Commission, that had the support of the community, went to the City Council, and was the consensus document that Commissioner Lindwall says should be the product of planning. And then we began 7 months of work on the zoning implementation, which was no easy feat. One of the reasons that the zoning code is so complex is because Evanston has grown up over time with a lot of little different details. And you've got, with 9,500 people per square mile, you've got a lot of structures that are butting right up against each other, and things have to be sensitive to work. The basic outcome of it was that we got some upzoning at transit-oriented intersections, Central and Green Bay. You could have more height and bulk than you've got there right now. In fact, there's less bulk right now than you saw in the first picture when it was actually multi-use. You go down to the other end, past Little Island, out by the CVS, and that was upzoned from commercial to B1A, but with the height of a B2, which allows you more floor area ratio. There was a lot of anti-canyonization ideas that were put in. Essentially what we got, and I'll make this deck available, but I have to keep this moving along, is the first instance of real form-based zoning in Evanston. And it wasn't that Central Street Neighbors or the residents generally or the consultants were trying to give Central Street anything that the rest of the city didn't have. Our hope was that it would become a template for how things would be done in Evanston. We were thinking that form-based zoning was a good thing to do, and actually a lot of that was incorporated into the downtown plan. I'm not going to go through all these points, but if you look at the purposes that are set forth in the zoning code portion of the overlay districts, I don't think there's a lot that anybody would argue with. These are a lot of really laudable goals. It's a forward visionary thinking about how to make a workable residential and business district, and a lot of the things that there's aspirational language about in the comprehensive plan. I'm in trouble if I'm out of batteries here. My clicker is not. I'm stuck on the purposes of the zoning code. Oh. Okay, so what was the outcome? If you could move forward, we preserved a lot of things that people really like, and the Eastwood was built, grandfathered into the pre-zoning guidelines, but I think there was some sensitivity to the conversation that went on, so you see some of the articulation and step backs that we had been envisioning for future projects. If you could go forward, you can go forward again. The art center came in, and that was a good activity generator for the street. Next, I was going to flip through these real quick. The Central Street Station project come up, so we did, under the zoning, add hundreds of units to the street. There's actually the capability under the current overlay district. You could easily add another 1,000 units. It's never been developed to its capacity. Next, please. And then we got, not we, but the street, the neighborhood, won a national award from the American Planning Association, saying that it was planning excellence, and the reasons for that were in the packet that we gave to you. If you could advance, please. Advance, please. The advance, please. We discussed the Ryan Field. So it's the payoff is that the last that I saw, we have a vacancy rate among retail on Central Street of 3%. Certainly it's less than it is in downtown or in the Loop, where there's much higher density. Our thesis was that you can have sustainability, and you can actually, by having certainty, you can reduce speculation, which was actually a theory of the original zoners 100 years ago. Next, please. People are happy with it, even before we had the sticky note session with the 6th and 7th ward. The map was already covered with blue dots in North Evanston along Central Street. Next, please. Obviously, you don't get everything you ask for. It took 17 years before the Independence Park improvements came to be. The library was closed, which was in derogation of the activity generation aspirations of the plan. Hasn't been a whole lot of pursuit of entertainment, and we haven't seen the development at either of the ends of the street that we wanted. Next, and possibly the last disappointment, is seeing that the current master plan and the draft zoning seem to burn this all down to the ground. Next, please. And we could have development that actually exceeds what existed in 2004, 2005, 2007, before we started all this, and with none of the step backs, articulations, rear protection that we've had. The lessons
your time
learned
has
are there.
expired, so I'm just going to ask you to wrap up, please.
Okay, I will wrap up then, but note that I did have a technical malfunction.
I stopped my clock for your technical malfunction. So.
Okay. In summation, Central Street neighbors would urge, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Our board feels strongly that no case has been made for amending an award-winning plan that was considered excellent by city staff just 10 years ago. And what exists on Central Street right now is a big part of why people move here, and what maintains the values that help fund our schools and local governments. It's what people love. Please help preserve it. Thank you, and I invite your questions.
I have a question, Jeff. And I don't know if you can answer this, but you talked a lot about scale and the pedestrian scale and all that. The retail, obviously, on Central Street is probably one of the most successful retail areas in the city, if not the most successful. Downtown, although, is not going to have one-story buildings. It's always going to be higher density and taller buildings. But we have one of the biggest problems in retail is downtown. Do you have any thoughts on why that is and what downtown can do to encourage retail?
I've given a ton of thought to that actually, because I love Evanston, and I know that the longstanding theory is that Old Orchard killed downtown Evanston. I think actually the injecting modernism and brutalism with the Fountain Square building and then the erection of the State National Bank building made it took away some of the quaintness. You didn't have the old Fountain Square situation. There was repeated problems with Fountain Square. Right now, the current Fountain Square has all the charm of, having a picnic on a median strip on the Kennedy Expressway. And so it's, I've been officed in downtown Evanston for, decades, and Orrington Street is kind of dark. With the darker and windier you make it, the more difficult it is. Good urban planning, smart growth begins with public spaces, and I think there was kind of a blown opportunity with Fountain Square that would have been good to have a rotary or a real square right in the middle and build outward from there. We've got to be real careful not to get it all hemmed in.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the I look at Andersonville as one of the more successful retail areas, and I blame that primarily on the narrowness of Clark Street. I don't think that same phenomenon would happen on Broadway, for example, in Chicago. And I was wondering what you thought about adding medians or anything that would like Sherman is a huge wide street, and any ideas on how to make that more pedestrian friendly, because I think all those things, including Fountain Square, improving Fountain Square would help this pedestrian feeling.
Well, if it's a real square, I mean, people don't want to feel overwhelmed. I don't want to say people are just like fish, but fish-like structure, and if any of you are anglers, if you have essentially an empty pond that's like a dish, you're not going to have fish in it. You got to have stumps and things that fish gather around. And so that was the theory of the articulation on Central Street, was to give people little nooks and crannies. There was this uniform streetscape idea for a long time. And I think that's something that appeals to people who do CAD, but it doesn't really translate into what human beings want to see when they're.
The reason I bring this up is because I don't think Fountain Square was addressed in the comprehensive plan. And I think it should be, because I think that is the center of the city. And if there was improvements to that, it would help the areas around
the Optima building on the southwest corner is problematic. You're not going to take that down, but on the Chase Bank corner, the northwest corner where we've got the sculpture, the old Chandler's space, all of those have little extra spaces. It wouldn't be that hard to make something where you're actually diverting cars around it and creating place. You got to give a little structure so you don't feel that you're in the middle of a parking lot like you sort of do now. But I would start with that.
Downtown Evanston, where the properties are cared for or rented, if you look at the buildings that are owned by people that actually are invested in these properties and are concerned about the condition of these properties, they are rented. And I'm not going to name the landlords, but we all know who they are. That these buildings are empty. They've been empty forever because they're not cared for. If you look at the building on Fountain Square that was recently acquired, and I don't know the gentleman's name, but his business was in the State Bank building that you were mentioning. And he put a ton of money in that building, and you have that salad green, whatever it's called, that's Sweet Greens. And that, I remember when that place was Reading and Greetings 45 years ago. It was a bookstore, but
it was a pizza place. It was World of Beer. They wanted to make it into the Tilted Kilt.
So we're getting better tenants in there if people are spending the money on the building. So I just want to say that your ideas of trying to create more walkability down there would improve the area, but we need to get I don't know what the answer is legally, but if someone knew how to convince people to take care of their buildings, you find them fully leased, because people want to put businesses in Evanston. People want to live here. For good reason.
Well, both our tax structure, state, county, and local, give too much of a break to something being vacant, and it actually incentivizes, because then, somebody tears something down and doesn't rebuild it, and you don't get taxed until you've got 2/3 occupancy. So, I mean, if with regard to buildings, I would probably have a vacancy tax. It's been toyed with in places. I think Berkeley, have looked at it. I haven't followed up to see how it's worked out. Of course, it would be resisted strongly by absentee landlords, but, use it or lose it, because you can't create any more street space.
What do you think about incentives for retail? I maybe I read this in one of the residents' comments, but we talk about incentives for affordable housing. When we want affordable housing, we provide incentives. If we want retail downtown, maybe there should be incentives for that.
The market left to its own device is not going to necessarily give you what you want, and we all love some of the incentives of capitalism, but by definition, entrepreneurs and especially people in real estate all don't work in concert. So you can actually get a situation where, there's overbuilding and then you have a bust. Incentives, if they're properly tailored, and, you keep the temptations for misgovernment and, cronyism out of it. But, brick and mortar needs a little help right now with everything that's happened to retail, the pandemic, online ordering, et cetera, and it's really vital to any business district. So I'm not opposed to, well thought out, cost effective incentives.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Smith. And the next speaker I have signed up is David Galloway with Design Evanston.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. I came prepared this evening with a 3-minute presentation and spent most of the afternoon working on it, ironically. You all have been provided with our 3-page document, which is a compilation of all of our active Design Evanston professional members' opinions, comments, and review of the comprehensive master plan. Can I confirm that you all have received that? Okay. Having received it, I see no reason for me to read through all these line items on it, but if you have any questions upon it after I give you my summary statement, I'd be happy to address those. So, Design Evanston conducted 3 workshops to evaluate the Envision Evanston 2045 plan, and we decided to focus on key chapters that related to future land use and housing, since most of us have a special interest in that, and we felt that many other groups and associations, committees, what have you, would be more effective in addressing such things as preservation, transportation, and parks. Based on these sessions, along with subsequent engagements among our members and input from other local architects, urban planners, designers, zoning, and real estate experts, we prepared the following comments and recommendations included in that document, submitted to you, the members of the LUC. It has also been submitted to local newspapers, and after this evening will be further distributed. This effort involved hundreds of hours of time by our design professionals, who coincidentally vary in age from the 30s to, yes, the 80s. Many of these individuals have lived in Evanston for most of their adult life. So this document is too lengthy for me to read to you tonight, or unnecessarily appropriate for me to read to you tonight. So let me make the following comments in summary. The current comprehensive plan is incomplete. It needs to provide additional data to better inform our goals and decisions. It requires significantly more visual examples of information, as well as photo examples of our city's unique urban attributes. It requires additional executive time to do justice to our noble intentions. Execution time, excuse me. We believe additional quantities and types of housing, based upon our own investigations, are needed to address the changing market and demographic, as well as keep our city economically and culturally viable. What does this mean moving forward? It does not mean, in our opinion, that we add up to 4+ living unit structures in all R1 and R2 districts. Nor does it mean that we do not investigate all options to increase the residency in these districts through context-sensitive modifications and alterations in existing stock and respectful additions of new stock. Increased densities of R3 and R4 properties also require similar sensitivity to contextual scale and character. It does not mean that we ignore our unique and admirable, even enviable, transit-oriented areas around our many rail stations, but investigate ways to maximize their desirability long-term as mixed-use areas that are highly desirable to live in and work in and visit. These also present far more. By maximizing these areas, we also provide more options, walkable options, for all the residential districts adjacent to them. It does not mean we create walled canyons along our various corridors of roads, but we maximize their potential for mixed-use development that is sensitive in scale and form to their adjacent neighborhoods and increases these neighborhoods' access to more viable and walkable mixed-use amenities. It does not mean that we ignore the missing middle housing types that are so desired by many people and whose injection into our existing fabric at appropriate locations will provide more attainable and more affordable options. Nor does it mean that we fail to recognize the many examples of this very kind of housing that have existed in our city, some starting over 100 years ago. Yes, double houses, cottage courts, 3- and 4-story small apartment buildings are already, one might argue, sensitively present in many residential neighborhoods. And we've become accustomed to them. So it is possible, I believe, to inject similar kinds of additional structures in certain districts, but they have to be specifically investigated per neighborhood and done in a graphic scale that everyone can understand. It doesn't mean that we fill downtown with lots of high-rise buildings of unlimited height, or that we ban all future tall buildings. Rather, we believe you should encourage well-designed, appropriately located buildings in the downtown that will provide the increased residency needed to vitalize and activate our downtown and replace the workers permanently lost to COVID work-at-home preferences. It doesn't mean that providing more housing, we invariably gain more affordable housing. Affordable housing is essential, and it requires its own specific intentions, actions, and means of support. And we believe that if properly done, affordable housing can be provided in every district in the entire city. Lastly, we should not impose on present and future generations an addictive attraction to and use of an appliance that has been responsible for some of the worst and ugliest urban and suburban places in our civic history, the automobile. We must recognize the current lack of demand for this device by more than a majority of current and future wannabe residents. We must put the automobile in its proper place in future urban planning, and that means in fewer places. We have been blessed with a city developed at a time of rail transit, real downtowns, mixed-use neighborhoods, narrower streets, many parks and charming neighborhoods, and other attributes. The new comprehensive plan must recognize these inherent benefits and accurately assess and implement future needs while sensitively maximizing the potential of these attributes. Moving on, we must employ visual graphic models and illustrations that better inform and guide us to make better decisions about density and residency. Jeff Smith showed you a number of examples wherein that kind of an investigation of what the possible forms might be is so beneficial. And we've had testimony by various organizations who have attempted to envision what the results of some of the verbiage in the comprehensive plan might be for their neighborhood. They shouldn't have to interpolate or interpret or imagine what the verbiage describes. It should be a graphic document and a graphic investigation. So finally, this adventure of the comprehensive plan will require additional time, effort, intention, patience, and purpose. Let's give it all of that and get on with it together. So thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them as best I can.
I have a couple comments.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway. Commissioner Halleck.
Yeah, and I'm looking at your report. Three things. First of all, throughout your report here, you talk about neighborhoods, and I brought this up before as to our planning, our thinking, our zoning should be neighborhood based. I don't know personally how exactly you define a neighborhood. I can define my neighborhood, but it really is different neighborhoods require different things. Some neighborhoods are currently all single family homes. It would not be a good idea, I don't think, to put a 4-flat right next to it. Other neighborhoods already have 4 flats. It's the tradition of that neighborhood to have higher density next to single family. That's fine for those neighborhoods. But right now, it seems like the zoning is just, let's change all of R1 to the same thing. And I think that's just conceptually wrong. Second thing is, I don't know if I agree with your comment on car ownership. One of your comments in this report is include data on car ownership and usage patterns among residents. I think that right now, the comprehensive plan talks about eliminating all parking requirements. I think that students don't drive, but families do. And they're very different. So again, neighborhoods downtown where there's primarily studios, 1 bedrooms, not married people with families. That's very different than the neighborhood. So that applies to parking. And thirdly, and this is, I don't think you mentioned this, but I did mention it before, and I just think it should be part of the comprehensive plan, maybe under implementation, that we need to talk about this affordable housing issue. We need to have a working group of professionals who deal with affordable housing so that we can learn how to actually get affordable housing. Because what we're talking about now will not, and everybody has said this, will not give us affordable housing. So I think that should be part of the implementation in the housing section.
If I can respond to your neighborhood comment, it's become apparent to many of us in our organization and all the walks and drives that we've taken around Evanston, and the fact that we've lived here, some of us, for 50 years, that there are unmistakably different there's a different character and scale and feel and context to one neighborhood street, even in the same district, to another one. And it's been our impression that we need to respect the existing scale and context if any additional residency is to be desired in that area. And in fact, one of the thrusts of many of our thoughts has been that we need to develop special programs and maybe a means of financing local residents that are struggling. I mean, I've seen houses in just about every neighborhood, quite frankly, where it's obvious that the owners are struggling to maintain their residence. So by virtue of us changing the definition of what constitutes a family, these people can accommodate additional residents, provide additional income, and still live in Evanston. And these kinds of initiatives are the warm and fuzzy stuff that Evanstonians get excited about. How can we help you? So, and that's at a small scale, and that can involve, local contractors, local architects, local social workers, local bankers, in a way which you just don't see in so many towns and cities.
First of all, thank you for this. I really read through this, and I agree with a lot of it. And, when we talk about bankers, for example, cooperating in the process for affordable housing, what we have to understand is banks are structured today basically to bookkeep. They don't really lend anymore. You got Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac buying all their debt. So they're just picking up a servicing premium on the deal, and they get the insurance from FHA, or they get their capital back from Fannie. And it's hard to get the banks to say, we're going to make a dollar commitment of many millions of dollars to a community to service an objective that you have. I think that affordable housing needs to be looked at from two standpoints. It needs to be looked at from a tenancy standpoint and from an ownership standpoint. And those are two different objectives, and they have different tactics and strategies that need to be considered in order for them to achieve success. And some of this needs to be looked at from a standpoint of what would the city be willing to undertake to do it. For example, would we be willing to undertake our own housing commission, where we use our bond and we do JVs with developers, and we take land that's either city owned or land that's privately owned, and we acquire it and develop it in partnership with developers, using the city's bond rating to drive down the cost of the capital, because this thing called building new is super expensive, and there's no way to do it effectively for affordability unless we are finding ways inside the formula to make the costs go down or go away. The one thing which I kind of disagreed with is about the ability to do it everywhere. I want to do it everywhere, but I don't think you can. I don't think that you can, for example, if a lot is a $700,000, $600,000 lot for a single family residence, I'm not sure how you're going to be able to mitigate that price in an affordable housing formula. It's just too big a number to overcome. Idealistically, we should be able to do it anywhere. Everyone should get along. We should all figure it out. But in economic practicality, I don't see it happening. So I just want to tell you, I think this is all great. It'd be great if we could pull all this aside and set this up as a separate, acknowledge it in our master plan, but it needs to be like a whole nother project of its own creation that is above my pay grade, but we'd love to talk about.
That's way above mine as well. And my term of everywhere meant to imply every district, obviously not every location. Yeah, okay. And as regard, George, I can get back to your comments on parking. Design Evanston has reviewed, I think, 4 significant projects in the last 6 weeks, more than we typically review in a couple years. Consistently, the developers are coming in and proposing a quantity of vehicles which, to our historical memory, which is unheard of. But they have the experience and the data to support this assertion. And it's become apparent to some of us older fellows that there's a new mentality, there's a new economy, there's a new prioritization of what's important in your life for many much younger residents. And they would willingly pay high rents to live in the right location and not own a car, because the car would be burdensome. It would also be a burden on their budget. And they also are of a generation that didn't grow up in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, where who you were to a great extent was based upon what kind of car you owned. So we're in a situation of a major sea change as far as the car's relationship to residents, particularly residents that are fortunate enough to live in a transit-oriented place with mixed-use development and so many walkable options as Evanston.
All right, thank you. We'll continue on with the rest of my list of speakers for this evening. Everyone will have 3 minutes, although we're being kind of liberal with our time since there's so few speakers. First speaker I have is John Kennedy, followed by Gul Aga.
Good evening, Commissioners. And again, I'd like to congratulate and thank all of you for your time. This is a lot of it. You're doing a lot of it. One of the things that occurred in a couple council meetings ago, both Mayor Biss and Steve Ruger, Deputy Assistant Mayor, basically said, if you need more time, take it. Get it done right. And I think what we're hearing today, especially with the first discussion on scheduling, goes right to that issue. There's a lot of groups that have put a lot of input into this program. Preservation Commission, Arts Council, Design Evanston, the Hinman Avenue Neighbors, Central Street Neighbors, and even the League of Women's Voters. Each of those groups, because of the time they put in, should have a position at this dais talking to you about how they see the new plan. That's going to take time. The other key thing, I've been wandering my ward for some weird reason, and I've been talking to a lot of people, and they all know about this. They didn't 2 months ago. This is a major community engagement opportunity to engage the public on questions such as, does Evanston really want to be more dense? I frankly don't remember being asked that question. And how much? The key thing being brought to us morally is that we need to add affordable housing, which I totally agree with. But where is it now? What types of housing is there? And there's a variety of them. I don't want to go through that issue, but there's different types of, quote, affordable. It depends upon how you define it. What's the demand behind each of those groups? Where do we project that demand to be going? These are questions that are not dealt with this current plan, yet the affordable housing piece is a keystone for why it's in front of you and being rushed through. I do want to pipe in a little bit on the parking. Jeff Smith and I did a study. Jeff got all the registered cars in Evanston, and we aligned them by building and looked at the 15 high-rise buildings that have built up and down our transit-oriented development corridor. About 2,500 units. They're all right next to the L and the Metro. The average density of cars registered, which is probably an undercount, to the units is 65%. Now it varies. The Scholar, just off Davis, near the tracks, is geared for students, grad and otherwise. Only 20%. So it's by type of building and where it is. Now, downtown might be able to afford fewer parking spots because they've got parking garages, and if people are commuting downtown, they can leave their car in the lot. Other places like Chicago Avenue corridor can't afford that. We don't have an overflow, and we're already dense on the parking. So the reality is people might not have a car in the first 1 or 2 years of moving to Evanston. But if they're in that income level, they're going to get it because they want to go to Barrington or to Wisconsin or somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Gul Aga, followed by Steve Test and Julia Forgash.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I have a couple of requests which follow actually from the discussions that have been happening here. The Commission has already asked for separating the zoning from the comprehensive plan, yet the comprehensive plan talks about lots of tall buildings downtown. And I would like to request that that language be removed. Now, density and height are two separate issues. Density is governed by the floor to area ratio with the height. So if you have a floor area ratio of 5, the FAR of 5, you can go 25 stories on 1/5 of the lot or go 5 stories across. The density doesn't change, the tallness does. So those two issues are separate, and one can talk about density without talking about tall buildings. Now, at the last meeting, I submitted a petition, which you might have seen, has been signed by over 350 people, 250 of them in downtown Evanston, most of them, asking that there be no more tall buildings. I'm also part of the Council of Presidents of Downtown Condo Associations. We have had meetings, and I can tell you every single president has a pulse of what their association wants. Downtown is a place where people live. There's already too many wind tunnels, shadows, and so on. The Envision Evanston talks about sustainability. I've submitted data. I'd be very willing to give a presentation. A single unit of in a high-rise versus a low-rise adds as much carbon dioxide emissions as driving 46,000 miles. That's almost 4 cars. So sustainability and tall buildings of concrete and glass are not compatible. So we should focus, not be hypocritical when we say we want sustainability. I would suggest that you ask the Environment Board to look at the embodied carbon, look at the tall buildings, and study this issue at least before we get to zoning, having removed this issue from Envision. Second thing I would like to request is that the plan includes some quality of life parameters. People are entitled to sunlight. People are entitled to privacy when structures are built. Streets should be pedestrian friendly, so there should be some setbacks, and there shouldn't be wind tunnels. Now, there was a meeting in downtown of 3 wards. Over 100 people showed up. 99% of them opposed tall buildings. These are people who live downtown. They do not want to see more tall buildings. They have trouble walking. They're in shadows. They don't like shopping downtown. They like to get out of downtown because it's hard. They drive out. It's hard to walk. You get run over. You had old people saying, I can't walk downtown. There's traffic congestion around Galt Street. So the general feeling, people do live downtown, and they are strongly opposed. That has been made clear to the staff. I hope that in the revisions, they do not push this idea in the envision plan that there should be lots of tall buildings. Let's separate the issue of density out. So those are my
Can I
questions.
ask you a question? How do you define a tall buildings?
So a 20-story building is a tall building. A 5-6-story building, which would have same floor area ratio, would be a low rise. Which
Right,
is the ratio
but
using.
what
And
would
then
be allowed in your mind, what would be allowed in downtown for
5, 6
future
is
buildings?
ideal. You could go up to 10 stories at 8 stories, depending on the materials.
See, part of the issue, I think, is that, as Jeff showed, lining the blocks with 10-story buildings would not be very pleasant. I mean, I'd personally rather see a 20-story building and then lower buildings and then maybe another 20-story building on another block, because that would let in sunlight and all of that. So I think we have to be very careful about just saying, 10 stories. Okay, everywhere, 10 stories. That's not going to result in what we want.
Well, if you have a floor to area ratio of, say, 5 and you allow 10 stories, then half of them will be forced to be low. So if you have 1 story across or 2 stories across on 4/5 of it,
Yeah.
you could only go 8 stories or 6 stories.
Yeah, I understand.
And so the floor to area ratio is the control on density. That's the knob.
I understand that. And that gets into this form-based zoning that Lakota was advocating, I think, because form is important.
Yeah.
It's just a blanket zoning and say, okay, everything in this area can be whatever it is, name it. 10 stories, 15, 5, whatever. It creates this, well, 5 maybe doesn't, but you showed it that it did on if 5 stories was on Central Street. So I think that's part of what we're not dealing with is this idea that blanket height is not the solution.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, you could cap it and then you have a floor to area ratio and setbacks, and you still allow the density with the FAR of 5 or 5.5 or whatever.
Saying is that if you took 50% of that site and built it up and took a 1-story building, you'd have a 10-story building, but it would be thinner,
Right.
which would be better. Again, it gets
that's fine, yeah.
to the form
But
issue.
the point is that from sustainability point of view, once you go above 10 stories, you're spending huge amounts of energy because of the carbon footprint of that building, from the steel, from the concrete that you need, the weight that you're putting on. It goes up with the square of the height. And I can go through the details and show you, and it takes 2.5 times the embodied carbon on a building that's above 20 stories versus 6 stories. And so from a sustainability point of view, it's kind of absurd to say, well, we want electrification of cars, but here we're going to have the equivalent of 4 cars by allowing these really tall buildings.
Yeah, but we just approved a 110-unit building on Chicago Avenue, which consisted of a high density of studios and 1-bedrooms. And I would say that building probably does not have any, and I think it was 50, 53, 54 parking for 100 units. So when we talk about taller buildings in a downtown area with a public transit opportunity like Evanston has, maybe some of your argument gets mitigated by the fact that you have fewer cars as a result of that tenant profile.
But that's what I'm saying, is that a low-rise building versus high-rise, let's take a 1,500 square foot apartment, it's equivalent to adding 46,000 miles of driving a year for the life of that building.
I understood what you were saying.
Yeah,
But
so
I guess
even
what
if
I'm
you
saying,
took away a
the
car-
price of that land isn't going to change.
Yeah. Now,
So you
when-
have to be able to accommodate the development, feasibility of development. And if you're building higher with units that don't require vehicles, because you build a shorter, wider building, you're probably going to be building units that are 2 or 3 bedrooms. And in that case, you're going to have more cars from that design typology than a building that is more geared towards a certain tenant profile that doesn't have cars. So I'm just wondering if the formulas that you're using to calculate carbon load for a taller building accommodates the changing behavioral patterns of the tenants that are occupying that.
Yeah, so I mean, if you replace the 12,000 miles average driven in Illinois, and Evanston may be less, average car goes 12,000 miles, you're adding 46,000 miles per year in terms of today's mileage standard. So even if you take away the car, you're not going to compensate. Now, the other thing is, do we want more family housing or do we want more studios? That's a separate decision. And as far as the density goes, you have this knob, which is the floor area ratio. You can add setbacks. You can take care of the form. But let's look at the sustainability and see where it stands. And also, let's take into account what the downtown residents say. There are people who live there, people who own there. There are 9 large condo buildings in this condo council. And we're working to form a downtown neighborhood association. We had our first meeting. And what has spurred it is Envision Evanston, because people don't want lots of tall buildings. They want a walkable downtown, pedestrian-friendly streets, sunlight. And if you just add these tall structures, nobody can walk around. It's like walking in canyons and caves and shadows everywhere.
So I'm going to ask a question.
Please.
Of the condo buildings that you're talking about,
Right.
how many of them are over 10 stories?
They are. And that's actually how I found out the inefficiency, because I looked at the data and looked at our utility bills. And then I started studying the issue. And that only happened once I became president of my condo building and started diving into the utility and the reports that the city asked. Then I got a copy of the reports that the city asked for in terms of the carbon footprint, electricity use per square foot. And I analyzed it, and that's one of the graphs that I can share. It's a straight line. As the height of the building goes up, the carbon footprint goes up to 2.5 times in the operational carbon footprint. And those are based on the calculations.
Not to get too much into the weeds, but you said part of that is embodied carbon, right?
Half of it was embodied carbon, a little more.
So does that,
48%.
I mean, this
Yeah.
is really getting deep,
One
but
bit, yeah.
does that different from a steel building versus a concrete building versus a
Yes.
wood building
Yes.
versus,
Yes,
I mean, all
concrete.
those.
Right. Concrete is, and for the tall buildings, you need concrete. So concrete is very carbon inefficient.
You don't need, I think everybody realizes carbon is not good, I'm sorry, concrete is
Exactly. Yeah, and
worse
these
in that
concrete
scale.
glass
But there
structures-
could be a steel building, could be a wood building, it's
Well, the steel is part of the concrete. I mean, they embed the steel into.
steel framing.
Right. Yeah.
There are practical limitations for that.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm just saying there's variables.
Right. So brick is a lot better in terms of the carbon footprint than concrete. And if you have a 6-7 story building, you can use brick as opposed to concrete. And that's part of the savings. And of course, wood structures are can be more carbon efficient.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
The next speaker I have up is Steve Test, followed by Julia Forgash, and then Ann Head.
Hi, Steve Test, 1135 Hinman Avenue. I was here last week when my neighbors and I learned about the proposal for a line of 100-foot tall buildings from Howard Street to downtown along Chicago Avenue and got alarmed. It was kind of a bomb that dropped in the middle of our neighborhood at the beginning of January. So once we spent some time talking to everybody about how bad that was, we decided we'd better look at the comprehensive plan now. And we did this last weekend. It's all redlined. We've been we just went through looking for unsubstantiated claims, questionable conclusions, questionable assumptions, missing data, all of that kind of stuff. And if you want real feedback from the citizens of Evanston, the timeline that the city council has laid out is absurd. It's not going to work. How are we going to get this information? The fact that the staff is rewriting the plan without getting our feedback already is ridiculous. So, and I could. No, you won't be able to read it because we just did this weekend. We're just neighbors. And if we had learned about this whole thing sooner, we would have been able to do it sooner. We're not a bunch of dopes. I read 2 newspapers every day, front to back, and we didn't find out about this the whole Envision Evanston 2045 until the beginning of this month. So we have lots of feedback, but just because I'm standing here and I can give this to you, it's not sufficient. You should be talking to all of the neighborhoods. All of the citizens of Evanston should have a chance to give you feedback before any more writing is done. That writing is going to be wasted if you don't have what all the neighbors, well, go ahead and write, but please, I've asked the city council to slow down, give the neighbors an opportunity to give feedback. There ought to be a real community outreach program around the city to gather real information, and not just in 3-minute blurbs. There's not enough time to sit down with staff, go through it chapter by chapter. I'm sure that we'd be happy to help you write it and edit it, but it's going to take time. So please help us, back us up with the city council, and get this thing slowed down so we can get some input into what will be, if you get the time, will be a much better plan than if you don't. Thanks.
Thank you for you and your neighbors. How do we get some of these things like unsubstantiated statements we brought up, but we only brought it up, I think, generally and not as specific as you've done. So you've done a lot of work for us. Thank you. And for the staff. But if it doesn't go to them, it's.
Yeah. How do we get it to you? Well, it's going to be hard to. The thing is, my point. I mean, I would be happy to do that. It's going to take some time. Who am I going to talk to? But it seems a little unfair that I'm the only citizen in Evanston that gets to do that, because there isn't an overall outreach. There may be lots of other ideas in the city.
But if you put yours in and then that's incorporated into the revised comp plan, then when we read the comp plan, we'll have less objections.
Well, it'll be better.
Yeah, I've got a question for Sarah. I know that we've had, there have been opportunities for, hours and whatever. Would it be possible for this gentleman to sit down with staff, whoever's actually doing the writing, and go through what the questions are? I'm sure a lot of them have already been raised by either us or others, but, I think the point is well taken that, the questions, concerns need to be really kind of addressed at the staff and resident level, especially since you've got a group that's gone through and, so I don't know how that works into the timing and the schedule, because I know that earlier I know staff is trying very hard to get us a document by February 21st, but, it's an issue.
Well, yes, and I realize that many people, for whatever reasons, didn't find out. I mean, I think the comprehensive plan and the whole Envision Evanston 2045 was pretty well publicized in the city.
Not well enough.
Well, we did get a lot of input from a lot of people, and we had one-on-one ability to set up one-on-one meetings, and there's a website and all kinds of things. I would really appreciate, excuse me, if you would at least entrust that to us and we can call you with questions. We had a good meeting, I think, with your whole neighborhood group.
Right.
So.
And we were, at that point, we were talking about specifically about the zoning of the buildings in the 3-block area of Chicago Avenue. This is a much larger bit of information, of feedback on all kinds of things. So I don't want to hand it over because it's the only thing we got. And But I would love to have the opportunity for my group of neighbors to meet and go over it. It's just, there's a lot to go over.
Sir.
We have lots of suggestions. So I don't know what to tell you about that.
Do you get the city newsletter?
The city, no.
No, well, again, I think that the best thing, and I'll leave it to you guys to coordinate, but I think arranging some sort of meeting where you can go through and walk through the changes efficiently, that's going to be the most efficient way to handle it. And I appreciate you not wanting to hand over your material, but it's probably important
To copying very well.
and it's probably important for you to explain what the concerns are. And if this is already being addressed in the rewrite,
Sure.
that's good for you to know too.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
So I would,
Is it possible for you to, since you have all that in one spot, is it possible to summarize any of that in like a written form?
I could, that would be the next step. But we just did the gross go through this
Right.
weekend. I could talk to you for a half an hour on the first chapter. So no.
I see.
This is not a very good document to start with. I'm sure I hope you all realize how bad it is.
Yes.
So we'll talk, but my point is I would encourage the city council and you to back us up, to get the city council to slow down and make this process open and transparent to as many people as possible and really gather comments and suggestions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Test. My next speaker is Julia Forgash, followed by Ann Head and Linda Damashek. Is Ms. Forgash here? I don't see her. No, that's Ms. Damashek. Ann Head?
Good evening, you guys. So I've been here the last meeting. I didn't stay until 11. I don't think I could. I want to thank you guys for taking the time, and you are taking the time to listen to everybody. You were here until 11 o'clock. And everyone, so far at the beginning of this meeting, and I believe City Council, I haven't been to a meeting there yet, want to do this right. And it was encouraging to hear today about the timing of getting the draft, having public comment, and you guys are very patient to listening to this because I'm sure a lot of it's repetitive. But I wanted to let you know that I appreciate this, that you do take this time to hear the citizens, and it is very important for everybody to know about it. Now, I don't know how Evanston publicized this Envision Evanston 2045, because I, again, as well as some other people, have not learned about it until this month. And I don't know how they got it through. What I'm asking is you guys and the city council, I don't know what the hurry is to get this passed by April 1st. If you want to do it right, do it right. It's not to sit there and say have multiple public comments, not to have multiple drafts. As I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Commissioner Max. But I understand what you say. Have a draft, have amendments. Eventually it will all come down into a nice red bow. But it's please take your time and do the right thing. There are very many good suggestions. Design Evanston, about the height of the buildings, the canyonization, the gentleman from downtown. Think about what he said. The people even downtown don't want tall buildings anymore because it is now a canyon. There are no sunlight. There's very little shadows. There's a proposal to build a 31-story building downtown. I mean, I grew up here, And there was a height restriction at one point of how tall a building could be in Evanston. And that is the Marcia Fields Lofts. A building could not be higher than 5 feet. And then came in the State Bank building. And then you couldn't be that tall. When's it going to stop? Evanston's losing its character with every tall building that comes in. People come here because of the character of Evanston. People want the neighborhoods to be as they are. I know there's going to have to be progress, but to maintain and keep the character of Evanston should be kept in mind, and the citizens should have that input. Again, I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and please take your time and do it right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The final speaker I have signed up is Linda Damashek for this evening.
Yes, Linda Damashek, Third Ward resident. So the comprehensive plan is a once in every 20-year process and document, and it deserves to be done thoroughly and not unnecessarily rushed based on an inappropriate political timeline. I wanted to speak specifically about the housing section. The general goal regarding affordable housing and increasing the number of units seems generally supported by community speakers. However, upzoning of single-family home districts and relying on an unrealistic trickle-down affordable housing approach with multiple chain moves to accomplish this goal, it is not an effective strategy. Some information from the Daily Northwestern in October 23rd, 2024, gave information about an Urban Institute study from March of 2023, which confirmed that a large-scale upzoning, increasing housing supply, but not affordable housing, by a mere 0.8%, this small fraction was almost exclusively concentrated at the higher end of the real estate market. The study also did not conclude that upzoning lowered rents for lower cost units. I'm also bringing your attention to an article that people might have missed because this has been so rushed with information coming out before Thanksgiving, before Christmas. But there's a really marvelous article by Larry Gavin of the Evanston Roundtable on December 19th, before Christmas, so probably, everybody missed it. It is chock full of data and survey information and documents, including a map of Evanston's 20 Cook County assessment areas that's very informative. So I really encourage every single one of you to read the entire article. It's very dense. It's going to take you a while, but there's so much good and informative information there. When was that article? December 19th, 2024. So here at the Land Use Commission, we've learned that only 30% of Evanston's housing are single-family dwellings, and that 70% of multifamily dwellings are distributed in a larger number of assessment areas. Affordable housing is only required for developers of greater than 6 units. So changing the single-family zoning to allow 4 units will not affect the supply of affordable housing at all. So just makes no sense. Also, pragmatically, just to do this real quick, Evanston is not a small town in the middle of a cornfield where increasing the supply of housing could affect rent prices. We're more like a neighborhood in a huge metropolitan area with a complex regional real estate market and lots of people moving here from other places, Chicago neighborhoods, other communities in the metro area, and out-of-town new residents. It is naive to think that giving profit-motivated developers free rein in our single-family neighborhoods will actually be an effective approach to increasing the supply of affordable housing. If rushed, the lofty goals of the comprehensive plan will create unexpected consequences as a result of inappropriate zoning policy changes that threaten the character of Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Damashek. I see one person I missed. I'm sorry, were there any questions for Ms. Damashek before? Okay. I believe your name is Michelle Klebeck.
Sorry, I think I signed up too late. Michelle Klebeck, 2207 Orrington. Today, I would like to talk about sustainable growth. I worry about how blanket upzoning proposals will incentivize demolition over adaptive reuse, undermining sustainability while ignoring a critical question. Do we even have the population growth to justify it? Upzoning is often framed as a response to housing shortages, but Evanston already has a 7% housing vacancy rate. Without clear evidence of increased demand, why would we encourage large-scale demolition and development when so many underutilized buildings are vacant that already exist? The greenest building is the one that already exists. Demolishing structures waste decades of embodied carbon, the energy and emissions invested in materials like steel, cement, and glass. Even the most efficient new buildings take decades to offset the carbon impact of tearing something down. The construction adds even more emissions through material production and transportation at a time when we should be cutting, not increasing our carbon footprint. Meanwhile, downtown Evanston has empty storefronts and underused commercial spaces that could be converted into mixed-use housing developments. Instead of upzoning our neighborhoods and incentivizing tear-down and rebuild projects, we should think of how we can incentivize adaptive reuse, retrofitting or adding onto existing spaces to support growth without unnecessary waste. This isn't just sustainability, it's about smart planning. By focusing on downtown areas, we can encourage growth where infrastructure already exists, reduce strain on the neighborhoods, and preserve Evanston's architectural character. If the data doesn't point to a population boom, why would we greenlight policies that erase our built environment in anticipation for a new one? Before we move forward with rezoning, we must ask, why aren't we focusing growth where it makes the most sense, with the buildings we already have? Sustainable growth means using our resources wisely, not demolishing in the name of speculative development. I encourage you all to take all the time you need to get much needed revisions on this plan. Also, I wanted to mention the little card that went out. I believe I got one card and it was 2 days after the meeting already happened. And it didn't have enough information on it. I probably might, if I didn't already know this was happening, I might have thrown it out. I know in Chicago, I have a property where they give really specific information about when zoning is changing. It tells you where it's changing and what it's being zoned to. That way people have a really clear idea of what it is that's happening. That's all. Thank you.
Where did Sarah go to?
I don't know.
I think she's back with the gentleman with this draft.
Oh, okay, because, it would be good if she heard this.
I just want to say one thing. You mentioned that normally you have in Chicago, you get that. Normally in Evanston, you do too.
Yeah.
It's just when we're doing the entire city, it's really hard to
get
spell
that.
out the entire city.
I think a lot of people would be, I also did some door-to-door and almost nobody knew about it.
I get the point that you're making. I just want to say that, for something this large, it's hard to do
I understand.
a simple postcard.
Yeah.
So thank you, though, for your
sure.
constant comments, coming to the meetings and sharing your information with us.
Sure.
Commissioner Lindwall?
While we're still discussing the comprehensive plan, I have kind of a suggestion for something that ought to be included in the land use chapter when it gets rewritten. I think we really ought to have some discussion about quality of life issues, and especially a mention of, human scale and pedestrian friendly, which are phrases that have come through public comment throughout this process. And again, I'm not quite sure how the land use chapter is going to get put together, but I think that of the ones that in the plan, that's among the one that really probably is in need of the most work and attention. And I'm not quite, I hope you guys can read our minds and come up with what the appropriate language is. But that's probably the one that, just thinking in terms of what we're going to get on the 21st, may need the most work and thought and attention. So best of luck with that.
All right, thank you. Any other, yes.
Joe Caprilli, 6th Ward, 40-year resident of Evanston. Sorry I didn't sign up. One quick question. I want to just clarify that the next draft of the plan will be available for the public on the 21st. Readily available for the public.
Correct.
That is the plan.
So when things are available to us, they're also available to the public at the same time.
Great. Thank you.
I didn't have it, but Ms. Brzezinski, please.
I don't have to repeat everybody that spoke. I happen to agree with everything that they said. But one thing, I sort of felt like I've been listening to this over the last couple of weeks, and I feel like that Wendy's commercial is like, where's the beef? Where's the data? I think that's going to be really important that be part of the plan when it comes through. And I think that, we're residents, we're owners, we're vested in our city. We deserve to have the full draft ahead of us. And not just 5 days. I mean, a lot of us are working full time. And so this is another full-time job. So the other thing is an RFP. I would bet that 50% of the RFPs that go out in this city are extended, have change orders in time. There is no reason why we are jumping through hoops, driving you guys crazy. And I so appreciate you. You guys are the experts, and putting stress on the residents, because quite frankly, I've been talking to hundreds of people in the last couple of days and weeks. No one's aware of it. I mean, I was aware of it because I'm in the business and I paid attention, but it's not like you go to Wilmette or another city doing. On their website every day for months, you'll say, hey, we're working on this plan. We don't know. People don't know. This plan started out, as you all know, in 2021 as an RFP for only the plan. The zoning came in after the fact in 2022 when the first RFP was killed. And so even if you knew we were doing a plan, no one, not even council, knew that the plan had been changed from an RFP for comprehensive plan and strategic plan to a comprehensive plan and zoning plan. So even if you knew in 2021 or 22 we were thinking about it, and this happened in 2023 when it was scrapped, it's confusing. And I think, so my point is just take the time that you need to do it right. We trust you. Council has its own stuff it's good at, but you're the experts. And that's one thing. Second of all, everybody keeps referring to Minneapolis. Minneapolis kept a lot of their overlay districts because they realized that made the neighborhoods. They also didn't change all their zoning. They maybe started out with a proposal to have up to 4 units, but then they brought it down and dropped it down to 3. They also scaled their lots to the size of the units that could be there. And they also were sensitive to light and how high you could go. It wasn't just you can put a box on everything. So I think as we're looking at it, we should probably talk to people in those areas and see what they did. But it's so complicated. And the last thing I'm going to say is I would hope that we will also be sensitive to the fact that are you going to undermine in some way our real estate market? Whereas people want to buy something and no one knows what's going to happen. And, people, this biggest investment most people have. And, there was one last point I wanted to say, and that is just trends in real estate are changing. And we talk a lot about why the downtown is a little bit suffering and all the single family and studios. But what we're also seeing is that older people like myself are buying houses and their kids are moving in with them. And it's becoming multi-generational. And how is that incorporated into this plan to look at that? So I would encourage that there be also a chapter in affordable housing, like Ms. Tomaszek said. Thank you for letting me go over. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brzezinski. Did I miss anyone else? See one more person coming in. I believe this is Mr. Roberts. Slingo, I'm sorry.
I had a typo last week. I wanted to give you a
corrected copy of my proposal. Just
Okay.
The typo was, the original was 35 feet, and I put down 28, which is
All right.
give everybody a revised copy.
Yep. Actually, if you just hand them to me, I'll pass them
Thank
down.
you so much. Take as many as you need.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else that I miss? Not seeing anyone. I will again say thank you to everyone who has come out to speak to us on this matter. We've heard from a number of people, some people several times on different topics within the comp plan. For the people who have asked us to slow things down, I think you've seen through our comments tonight that we will be continuing this discussion until the 26th of February, which will not be a time for this commission to vote, as was directed by City Council, simply because staff has requested time till the 21st in order to do the work that they feel needs to be done. And it is unfair for the residents of the city, for the Land Use Commission, for everyone involved to get a draft on the 21st and vote on it on the 26th and not be able to take public comment as part of that. So I'll ask at this point if there is a motion to continue this hearing until February 26th.
Sure. I move that the hearing on the comprehensive plan be continued to February 26th.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Lindwall. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Would you call the roll, please, Ms. Jones?
Commissioner Aravallo?
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Linwall?
Yes.
Commissioner Mabadi?
Yes.
Commissioner Mangum?
Yes.
Commissioner Vodenchev?
Yes.
Commissioner Puctel?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
Yes. So with 9 votes, the motion to continue this issue until February 26th passes. And so that will be the next discussion on the comp plan.
No. Yeah.
We're getting it on the 21st, but the discussion will be held on the 26th. So that's what we've continued this to that point. I don't believe, I asked Ms. Jones and Ms. Flax, maybe you want to weigh in. We have no matters before us on the 12th, correct? So we will not.
Yeah, as far as I know, we don't have anything for the 12th.
Okay, so we will not be meeting on the 12th, which means this commission will not meet again until the 26th. So that will be the next land use commission will be on February 26th in council chambers at 6 o'clock.
Will we still be in this building? Another
Oh,
question.
that's true. That's true.
When? Okay.
You're going to be in here through the end of March.
All right.
Oh, and also for the start time, we would be going back to 7 unless you would prefer to start early on.
I think probably it would be better to start at
6.
7.
Or at 7 on the 26th.
Even though
Well, I mean, it kind of depends because I think we will take public testimony, obviously, but
I think with the next meeting, we will continue, or we will go
That's
back to kind of the traditional model of public testimony during discussion, not public comment after our discussion.
right. No, I think we do need to have testimony, and the question is, well, I guess we could meet at 6.
I would rather meet at 6 than stay till
Okay.
midnight.
All right, then we'll meet at 6
All right.
for that one,
So,
and then decide the times
February
later.
26th at 6 o'clock here in council chambers. At that point, the Land Use Commission will be determining its, once it sees the draft, the next round of the draft, will determine how many meetings it feels probably need to be held in order to move this on to City Council. And at that point, City Council will have to decide what they want to do when it moves on to them. But that's where we stand right now is this matter is continued to February 26th, 6 p.m. here in council chambers. We will not be meeting on the 12th or the 19th because there's no matters to bring before us at that time, correct? All right. With that, then, we move into the final item of our business, which is the election of the chair. As I mentioned last week, I'm stepping down at the conclusion of tonight's meeting, so we do need to elect a new chair. So at this point, I would nominate Commissioner Lindwall to be the next chair of the Land Use Commission. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Lindwall, are you willing to step into the role?
Yes, although I have my doubts that I can do as good a job as you have done,
Well, thank
Chair
you.
Rogers.
Thank you.
But I will do my best.
All right, so with that, all in favor of Jean Lindwall being the next chair of the Land Use Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On a voice vote, it does pass. Commissioner Pucktell will continue to be the vice chair of the commission. And with that, I will ask if there is a motion to adjourn.
Before that, I would like to say thank you very much for all of your service. You've made our job really easy. And you will be missed.
Thank you. With that, then,
I have one more thing. Talking about communications, people in the city understanding what's going on. I want to compliment Evanston Now and the Roundtable because they have been very diligent about documenting what goes on in these meetings and frankly, and the council meetings. So if you really want to know what's been said at these meetings, they do a tremendous job. And in particular, I want to mention an article that was written in Evanston Now just recently, January 28th, that talked about the process or lack of process that the city has gone through, which will make your hair stand on end if you read this, because it's very disappointing that we have been through this year-long process, and the product that we received just does not reflect what we should have gotten, and it'll explain maybe some of the reasons why. So I encourage you to read this article in Evanston Now.
thank you. Now I will ask for that motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Anybody have any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The commission does stand adjourned until February 26th. Thank you, everyone.